Today I'm sharing with you two different casseroles that I made in the last couple of weeks to feed our large group we have on the weekends for game night. Now this first casserole is a casserole starring cornflakes on top, which might sound odd, but it tastes delicious, trust me. We're going to need some bouillon cubes, some sour cream, a can of cream of chicken soup, some shredded cheese, potatoes, and I am doubling the recipe that will be in the description box because this week I had 16 to feed. Oh, and you're also gonna need some chicken. I went ahead and salted some water, which I brought up to a boil, and then added in our potatoes, which I peeled and cubed. You're going to want to cook these until they are just starting to soften up. You don't want them to get too soft because otherwise they will turn into basically mashed potatoes while you're mixing everything together. So it is okay if it get overcooked. I have done it before and it still tastes great. It just doesn't have the same texture. I did add salt into the water, and as you can see, when you stab it in, it should go in firmly but not break apart and crumble. This takes about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on whether or not you let your water actually get up to a boil, which sometimes I get impatient and I add things in too early. I will have the recipes below in the description box and the link to the second recipe because I took that off of a website and I want her to get the credit. Now you're going to drain your potatoes off, and then I went ahead and dumped my potatoes into my pan. This is a large pan. It's not a 9x13. It's actually a 13x18 pan, so a pretty large pan, but I am doubling this recipe, so keep that in mind. Now I went ahead and added in my onions into my pan, which I had heated up that oil in, and I added in some crushed up garlic, and I added in some bouillon cubes. Now I love using bouillon cubes because they have so much flavor in them and they really help to season your dishes without you having to have a lot of different seasonings or ingredients on hand. I went ahead and added in my chicken and just stirred it around, and then added in some salt and pepper and went ahead and cooked that meat until it was almost all the way cooked through. Don't worry about getting it all the way cooked through because it will bake a little bit more in the oven and it will make sure it's cooked all the way through after baking in the oven. Add your meat into your dish with your potatoes and then go ahead and pour in your cheese and your cream of chicken soup. I used 2 different cans of cream of chicken soup. Oh, and your sour cream, which I used 2 cans of sour cream. Then you're going to mix everything together. I just mixed it in the pan. I have fond memories of eating this casserole when I was growing up, and it was one of my favorites that my mom used to make for us. It uses a interesting ingredient because I haven't seen a whole lot of casseroles that use cornflakes as the topping, but you're going to take some cornflakes, crush them up just with your hands, and then pour them over the top. You can use as much or as little as you want. I think it adds a really nice crunch and it's not too strong of a flavor, so it really complements the dish really well, and it also adds that nice golden yellow crust on top and is just delicious and warm and comforting. This dish is like a baked potato in a bowl. It's delicious. After crumbling those cornflakes on top, I just popped it back in the oven for about 20 minutes just to heat everything through, make sure that chicken is fully cooked, and this is what we ended up with. Next, we're making a chicken and broccoli pasta bake from mamagourmand.com. Melissa made this recipe. You're going to be using chicken. I have a whole chicken we're going to roast. Chicken bouillon cubes, a little bit of butter or margarine, some shredded cheese. I have a mixture of shredded cheese, some minced garlic, a box of your favorite kind of pasta. I have elbow noodle pasta, a little bit of flour, a bag of broccoli, some vegetable oil, a little bit of Dijon mustard if you don't have dry mustard, salt and pepper, onion powder, and a little bit of nutmeg. And nutmeg's that secret ingredient that really brings the flavor home. First up, I'm going to go ahead and roast this chicken. Now, if you've never roasted a whole chicken, don't worry, it's fairly simple. All you do is take the gizzards out of the inside, and then you're going to stick it in your pan, put little pats of butter on top and a generous amount of salt and pepper, and I also used a little bit of onion powder. And then you're going to stick it in your oven at 350 degrees and just let it come up to 165 degrees internally when you stab it with a meat thermometer at the thickest part of the chicken. I'm going to leave a link showing how to easily make a chicken in case you prefer drawn out or written out instructions. Then I went ahead and took out some of my chicken breast and cut it into smaller pieces. Don't worry, the rest of the chicken is going to be eaten by my husband and I throughout the week, but this is what we were needing for this particular dish on the weekend. I went ahead and brought water up to boil, which I salted and added in my pasta. Then I drained off the pasta and went ahead and added in the pasta and the chicken into my pan that's on the side. Then I heated up some oil in a pot and added in some crushed up garlic that I went ahead and started browning, added in my butter and a little bit of flour. We're just gonna cook it for a few seconds here, just until it's well incorporated. You don't want it to dry out too much or cook off too much. This is a roux, and we're making basically a bechamel sauce, which is like a cream sauce. I went ahead and added in a little bit of milk. Now you want to add your milk in a little bit at a time here and stir it frequently, preferably with a whisk, which I did transfer from a spoon into a whisk just because it's a lot easier with a whisk. And the reason why you added the milk in gradually is just so you don't get any lumps or clumps of flour. You're going to stir it frequently as you slowly add in the rest of the milk, and then you're going to add in your seasonings. I just added in the salt and pepper that the recipe called for, and a little bit of onion powder. And then the recipe also called for dry mustard, which I did not have, but I saw on the internet that you can use a little bit of, actually a lot of Dijon mustard to replace the little bit of dry mustard that the recipe called for. And I felt like that was a really good substitution. The end result was phenomenal. So I went ahead and did that substitution. Then I added in a little bit of nutmeg and our bouillon cubes, which I added in some water because the recipe calls for some chicken stock, and I felt like the water and the bouillon cubes was my easy way of making sure I had that chicken stock on hand. Then I added in the cheese and went ahead and stirred everything together and made sure that the bouillon cubes had fully dissolved and everything had heated up and thickened up. I poured all this mixture into my pan and went ahead and stirred it thoroughly so that everything was really well incorporated. The sauce is nice and thickened, as you can see, but it still is very liquidy, so it's going to have time to thicken up even more and soak up some of that sauce into the noodles when we put it in the oven to bake. Now, I knew that not everyone in our group enjoys broccoli, so I decided I was going to add the broccoli in at the end of the recipe instead of while the chicken was cooking as the recipe called for, because I wanted to keep the broccoli on one side of the dish so that one side was broccoli free for our friends that aren't as fond of that particular vegetable. I then sprinkled the rest of our cheese on top, then stuck it in the oven just long enough to melt that cheese and heat everything through, which was about 15 to 20 minutes. And as you can see, that cheese is so nice and melty. This was a delicious dish, very filling, and I had a lot of people compliment the dish and say that they really enjoyed it. So I think this was a good hit and very simple to put together. Not too many crazy ingredients, things I would normally have on hand, and it fed a lot of people, which is always a big plus because on the weekends we have a lot of people we're feeding. Thank you all for stopping by today. I hope you enjoy these meals. Let me know if you get to try them, and until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful week.